Making cream cheese at home does not have to be complicated. So in this video, I'm going to show you a method that is faster, easier, and way more creamy than most recipes you're gonna find. And you don't need any experience to pull it off. If you're serious about learning to make your own cheese, there's a link to my free Foundations of Cheesemaking doc below. Now, before we start, you need to understand something important. My goal for this cream cheese was to find a method that makes a cream cheese closest to what you buy at the store, because that's what we're accustomed to eating on our bagels and using to make cheesecake. So I wanted something that is super creamy, has a light buttery tang, spreads like a dream, and that my family accepts as cream cheese.
C, D.
I think that's probably milder flavor.
Isn't that better?
Yeah, probably.
Cream cheese is actually an excellent cheese to start with because it touches all 5 stages of what I call the cream method, which is my framework for making any cheese. We will move through each stage as we go. And once you understand all the stages, all your cheese making recipes will start to make so much more sense. Now, before your milk can become cheese, it needs the right environment. So in the first stage of the cream method, the C stands for culturing and conditioning the milk. Now, for cream cheese, we first have to make sure we have the right proportions of cream and milk. Contrary to what many people think, and what I used to think myself, cream cheese is not cream that is cheese. Rather, it's a cheese that is extra creamy. This means that it actually has a higher milk to cream ratio. And for commercial cream cheese, the golden standard is about 33% fat. So I experimented with a whole bunch of different ratios, but what I finally settled on is 1 part cream to 3 parts milk. For me, this yields a cream cheese that is rich enough to be special, but not so rich that it's no longer cheese. And while we're on the subject of milk, during this process, I discovered something that totally caught me off guard. I'll get to it at the end, but just know that if you're using store milk, this changes everything. Now comes a part in the conditioning process that's gonna make you stop and go, wait, what? But stick with me here because there is a good reason for this step. We are going to boil the milk. I know, there is so much good bacteria in fresh milk that is absolutely necessary for making good cheese. Boiling the milk is typically the last thing that a cheesemaker would do. But in this case, there's a good reason for it. 2, actually. First, boiling denatures the proteins, which means that the milk sets up more firmly. And second, boiling makes it so that all parts of the milk get incorporated better, so you get more cheese. So in the case of cream cheese, boiling is actually beneficial. After boiling the milk, cool it back down to room temperature. When you dump it into a glass jar, go slowly so you do not crack the jar. Allow it to temper. You can just let it sit at room temperature, but I like to go a little faster, so I put it into some cool water. It's not cold, and I keep the spoon in it and just stir it as it goes. And after a couple minutes, I will add ice to this, just to speed the cooling process. And now is the time to do the second part of the C stage, culturing the milk. Now, I've tested a lot of options for this. All of them work really well, so you can choose whichever one makes the most sense for you. I've used Clabber, the whey from Clabber, cultured buttermilk, and I've used a freeze-dried culture, Floridanica. For the natural cultures, I use about a teaspoon per quart of liquid, and for the freeze-dried cultures, it's just a pinch. But there is one thing I need to be honest about. I've never been able to nail the exact Philadelphia cream cheese flavor using just natural cultures, which makes sense because they are trademarked and they have their own special things. But I discovered that one way to get pretty darn close to that buttery, sweet, tangy flavor that I just love is to add a pinch of LM57, a mesophilic adjunct, along with whatever main culture that you are using. The LM57 adds a nice flavor boost, but it is totally optional. So for today, I'm gonna use a teaspoon of Clabber. It smells delicious and buttery, not like cream cheese, but like its own flavor. So you can use just the whey off of that if you have enough whey, or you can just scoop up about that much. I don't actually measure, I just grab some and set it in a little container. Stir it up just to break it up some and get that ready to add to the milk. While the milk is still cooling, we have not finished this first stage yet, but we're gonna move to the second stage, which is adding the rennet. I'm using an animal rennet, but there are lots of options. I talk more about this in the Foundations doc. Link is below. Now for cream cheese, we only want the tiniest bit of rennet, just 1 drop. Because remember, we do not want to have a firm set curd. So I just take my little dropper here and put 1 drop into a bowl and set it aside. Whoops, that was way too much. So I'm gonna do it into another bowl and see if I can just get 1 drop out of here. Oh, that was like 5 drops. This is not working. Come on, drop. 1 drop. So there is now 1 drop of rennet in there. You're gonna dilute it with a little bit of water, but I'm not doing that yet because you do not want to dilute it before you're ready to use it. So now I just set this aside. Culture and rennet, and put this away for now. Now, when the milk is just sitting here, you actually do not need a thermometer to check it. You can just touch it and see if it feels like room temperature. I aim for anywhere between, I don't know, 80 and 90 degrees, but you can check it with your thermometer. This is at 85-ish. So yeah, it's pretty perfect. So now we're gonna finish adding the culture, which is just this clabber. I'm gonna add a little bit of milk, make it runnier. And then right away, you move straight onto the rennet. There's that 1 drop in there, and I'm gonna just add a tiny bit of water just to swirl it around and make sure it's all mixed in there, and then add that. And then you take your lid, screw it on tight, and give it a good shake just to mix it up. I just labeled the jar cream cheese. You can't read that, I can. And the date. Set it on your counter, keep the lid cracked. Let it set there for about 12 to 18 hours. If you want a sweeter cream cheese, let it coagulate for the shorter amount of time. If you want it tangier, let it go a little bit longer. That's it for now, and I'll see you tomorrow. So it's been a bunch of hours. Now the curd has set. Let me show you. This one has actually set more than normally. Maybe I accidentally got a couple drops of rennet in instead of 1 like I thought. You can see how it is coagulated there. It's kind of rising up like a science project. Oh, there's whey on top. Yeah, so this is definitely been sitting long enough, and it's probably going to be a stronger cheese. I could have let it set for a good 6 to 8 hours less. So now that the curd is set, we move to the 3rd stage of the cream method, which is where we express or extract the whey. And to do this for this cheese, we're just going to dump the contents of this jar into a cheesecloth lined bowl, tie up the ends, and then hang it so that it can drain off. Generally, I let this drain for about 8 to 12 hours. If you're doing a bigger batch, you will need to drain it for the longer amount of time, and you can even go up as high as 24 hours. Or you could do it for less time, depending on how fast the whey comes off and how creamy of a cream cheese you want. Before you pour that whey down the drain, wait. You can save a teaspoon of this to culture your next batch of cream cheese, and you can use the rest in place of water for the homemade bagels you're gonna make to spread the cream cheese on. Now, the majority of the whey will come out in the first 4 hours, maybe even the first hour. I typically do 2 things. First, at about the 4-hour mark, I open up the bag and I add about a half teaspoon of salt per liter just to help that whey extract. The other thing I do is I stir the curd just to make sure that the drier outer edge is incorporated in the wetter middle has access to drain. Okay, once the whey is out and the cheese has hung long enough, it is time for the 4th stage of the cream method, which is A, and that stands for assembling the cheese. Now with cream cheese, we're not pressing it into a wheel. Instead, we have to work it a little. When you first open the bag, you'll probably notice little white clumps mixed into the cream cheese. That's completely normal, especially with raw milk, because during culturing, the milk and cream naturally separate a bit, so you end up with some firmer milk curds and some richer cream curds, and they don't always blend back together on their own. And that leads to an important expectation. Homemade cream cheese will never be quite as perfectly smooth as the kind from the store. The reason for this is that commercial producers use all sorts of interventions. They use stabilizers, they reheat the cheese so that it's fluid enough to package, and they homogenize the final product under high pressure to create that ultra uniform texture. At home, your options are much simpler. Blitz it in a food processor or with an immersion blender, or leave it as is and embrace the fact that it's real homemade cream cheese. It's your call. I like mine smooth, so I use an immersion blender to cream it up. Now first, I always weigh it. Usually you should get about half a pound of final cream cheese for a quart of milk, 9.4 ounces. And then I blend it to death and beyond. This cream cheese is a little bit wetter than some of them, so I could have let it hang more, and it's a little bit funky, which means I had too much culture in it and I let it culture too long. But both of them are easily fixable for next time. And then to finish, just package the cheese into a container or a jar, or for more of the classic cream cheese vibe, scoop it into molds, and then you just let it chill overnight. And now we get to the final stage. The M of cream typically stands for maturing, but because this is not an aged cheese, in this case, the M stands for Good. Use this cream cheese on anything that you would typically use commercial cream cheese for. So on bagels, cheesecake, dips. The cream cheese should last in your fridge for 1 week, 2 weeks maybe, especially if it's been well salted. And yay, you're good to go. Now, while testing this recipe, I ran into a few unexpected things that are worth knowing before you try it yourself. And I also want to answer a few questions that you're probably wondering about. So first up, if your cream cheese turns out dry and crumblier than you want, you may have hung it too long to drain, or maybe you used too much rennet, or perhaps you just need to blend it longer. So besides making these adaptations, next time you make the cream cheese, one other thing you can try is add a little bit of cream at the end. Number two, my cheese tastes a little too funky or stronger than I want it to. Now, this could be because you used a little more culture than was necessary, or maybe you cultured it too long, or the temps in your house were too high during ripening. I noticed that when I cultured store milk with a natural culture, clabber in my case, the cream cheese turned out just a little bit off. It wasn't quite as pleasant tasting. So if your cream cheese tastes a little funky, here are some things you can do. Dial back the amount of culture. Culture it for less time. Refrigerate the cheese during the draining process. Pair store milk with more commercial cultures like cultured buttermilk or freeze-dried cultures. The third question, can cream cheese be frozen? I froze a couple blocks of cream cheese and tested it after a few days, and you guys, it was exactly the same as before I froze it. So yes, you can freeze your cream cheese. Why do I detect a little bit of graininess in my cream cheese? If you eat your cream cheese straight from the fridge when it is cold, you will possibly be able to detect some texture to it. So my recommendation is to let it come up to room temperature before you eat it, and at that point it should taste very smooth on the tongue. Question, will boiling the milk for longer make a creamier cheese or a firmer cheese? Boiling the milk for 5 minutes gave me a cheese that was ever so slightly chalky and no noticeably firmer. So don't bother. Can I whip butter into the finished cream cheese as a stabilizer? I tried it, and it makes the cheese greasier, less cheesy, and because butter repels water, the cream cheese actually wept more and was less stable. So nope, don't do it. Can I just blend up cottage cheese to make cream cheese? I tried it using a clabber cottage cheese because I wanted to see if I could make cream cheese without rennet. And it blends up fine. It looks pretty creamy, but it has a little bit of graininess to it. It weeps more, it is not stable, it just is not the right texture. It's very grainy. It is not cream cheese at all. You really do need to use the rennet to make a proper cream cheese. Can I make cream cheese with just milk and lemon juice? Okay, people, there is a wildly popular 3-ingredient cream cheese recipe, milk, lemon juice, and salt, floating around the internet that has millions of views and hundreds of 5-star comments, and we need to talk about it. I tried this method with my milk, with store milk. I wanted to love it because such a simple recipe would be amazing, but it was horrible. Chalky, grainy, clay-like in texture, zero flavor.
It's gross.
I added cream and salt, not even a little bit creamy. It kind of draws your mouth in. Do not like this one. And in the fridge, it developed this gummy, gluey. I also tried curdling milk with homemade yogurt, an adjacent idea, and it was exactly the same. Terrible. So don't do it. They're lying to you. Can I use store milk to make cream cheese? Okay, friends. This is the thing that surprised me the most. Store milk actually makes a more commercial style cream cheese than raw milk.
Interesting.
And I found this so frustrating. But upon further research, I learned that there is a really good reason for it. So let me explain. The reason isn't because it's pasteurized, but because it is homogenized. Homogenization breaks down the fat so it is uniformly blended throughout the milk, which results in a smoother, creamier cream cheese. Fresh, unprocessed milk or raw milk, no matter how hard we try, will never quite get as smooth. So then, of course, the next question is, well, can't we homogenize milk at home? I looked into it, and homogenization requires specialized pressurized equipment. And the best we've got in most home kitchens is a blender or a high-powered food processor, so you cannot homogenize it. So the good news is, to all of you who have store milk to work with, in this case, you are going to get a cream cheese that is much more similar to commercial style cream cheese. So go ye forth and celebrate with lots and lots of cream cheese. Now I know the next question is, do I still need to boil the milk if I am using pasteurized milk because it was already heated? The answer is, well, I tested by boiling store milk and it actually gave me a looser set. So if you're using pasteurized milk, just heat the milk and the cream to about 80, 90 degrees and then culture it. You do not need to boil it. Now, if making this cream cheese has you wondering what else you can make besides sourdough bagels, I want you to go watch this video next because it covers everything that you need to know to start making cheese. And once you see how approachable cheese making is, you're gonna want to try to make everything. Happy milk slinging.